Hey guys, it's me again. So let me just say that this is one of the hardest, worst videos I've had to ever do because this is the very first year that I've been reviewing movies that not a single movie I've given an F to, and no D-. I mean, like, number one, I'm considering changing to a D-, but my point is, last year I had two Fs, in 2015 I also had two Fs, but anyway, right, this year, obviously, well, I don't have to draw you a picture. Well, there are only a few Ds that I got, and for most of the year, the lowest grade I had was a C-. So I've seen 43 movies that came out in 2017, and, well, very few of them I ended up really disliking. So this list is gonna be kind of more friendly than usual. So without further ado, let's get started.
Number 10.
So starting off our list, we have a tie between the Emoji Movie and It Comes at Night. And I honestly did not want to put the Emoji Movie on this list, not just because I don't want to follow all the norms, but, well, I didn't think it was that bad. That and this is from the same director as 2008's Igor, a very underrated animated movie that I remember bringing on a big 8th grade field trip, and we watched it on the bus and everyone loved it. But let me just say, to start off with the Emoji Movie, I guess I just thought it was so-so. And I felt like it stretched its idea about being in a phone pretty much as far as it could go. I thought it was kind of clever the way these characters are trying to get up into the cloud, which I guess is a reference to iCloud, where you can reference all your stuff like throughout the world. And I also like the idea of being able to leave your own app. But I guess this movie's problems stem from the fact that it's just an unoriginal attempt. And TJ Miller's character's parents are just, they're supposed to be meh, as in so meh that they're funny, but I didn't really find it that way. I find it kind of clever that the most famous emoji is the original one, and some very notable emojis that we all probably use, but it had kind of a cynical message in the end, and I think that its depictions of emojis are a little bit far-fetched. I mean, I felt like no one should ask someone out just because there's a great emoji, and trust me, your cell phone can't replicate your friend. So those reasons are why it's on the list, but only number 10. For It Comes at Night, well, it was kind of like a B movie and an F movie mashed together. Like, it seemed more like a high school project where it was testing different boundaries about how it was defying our expectations a little bit and trying to give horror in a brand new way, but deviating so much that a lot of people said that it wasn't really a horror movie at all, and not really in the long run scary. I found that it had moments that were, and it's a well shot film, and the characters are acted well enough. However, just I couldn't keep back my feeling of disappointment in the end.
Number 9.
And taking the number 9 spot, we have Fist Fight. Now, this is honestly like my sort of movie in a few ways, and it is not in some few ways too. For starters, like, it's situated in high school, and there are some very big high school pranksters. I was never a high school prankster, but I love watching these sort of high school pranks. And I also was very looking forward to this big fist fight that they were really advertising. And it was going okay at first. I was even considering recommending it because the entire movie had the final fight, like, on its shoulders. But I think that the part where I thought I was probably going to give this thumbs down was when Charlie Day's character is forced to spend so much money on these MacBook Pros. I know that might have just been an intention for comedy, but I know how expensive they are. It didn't make me laugh. And I found Ice Cube's character just a little bit too creepy. But yeah, a worthy opponent to the fist fight, but just there are too many elements where I felt like if I had just gotten a hold of it, it would have been so much better in the end.
Number 8.
And coming in at number 8, we have Chips. I never watched the original TV show, and believe it or not, Baywatch I actually like a little bit more than this, but let me explain why Chips is on this list. I felt like it had potential to be a very funny buddy cop movie as well as a mystery of a Hercule Poirot guessing game. You know, where we're trying to guess who these 5 rogue police officers are. And I get that that would be a little bit of a stretch to do 5 instead of 1 or even 2. And it does show a few of them already, so maybe that limits it a little bit. But the way I looked at the screenplay, it seemed like the creators had the potential to do a mystery around this. I also just in the end found it to just be a movie that everyone will forget about by the end. And I found that its homophobia jokes were kind of cheap. The beginning of the movie, not my thing. When Michael Peña's character turns in these guys in an undercover mission, where it is actually kind of heartbreaking. I rooted against him as a result for most of the movie.
Number 7.
Okay, now a lot of you are going to hate me for this, and I even kind of hate myself, but this is an honest top 10. I am not going to follow any norms, and this is going to be on a lot of best videos of 2017, but coming in at number 7 for the worst for me is Dunkirk. I guess I'm not a big Christopher Nolan fan. A lot of people have said that this is the best war movie since Saving Private Ryan, and maybe even better. And I thought, did we watch the same movie? Because I remember the first time I saw Saving Private Ryan, I heard that that old war veterans got PTSD when they were watching this movie and had to walk out of the first 10 or so minutes. Dunkirk is nowhere near that level of tension and just brilliance. I heard that Christopher Nolan had patched up several of the old planes and ships that were actually used in the Battle of Dunkirk, so that was pretty swell. However, I also looked it up and found out that Nolan wasn't interested in telling the story of these characters. He just wanted to show the story of how they got out. And I thought, it's kind of obvious that the way to do a very tense movie is to have characters that we really don't want killed. So the big fire, the big explosions, the oil leaks, and the airplanes, so that they can seem real, like we're actually in the movie and we're right next to these characters. But in Dunkirk, I couldn't tell you a quarter of the names of these people. I guess that's one of the main reasons why it's on this list, because I feel like Christopher Nolan should have known better. And even though it's a very well shot film, it still feels a little bit too slow, and the punches seem a little too pulled. And by the end, it's supposed to be very celebratory, but I wasn't really in the celebration as much. I'm so grateful that 300,000 people were able to be saved from Dunkirk, but my mind wasn't saved from my criticism gene in this movie.
Number 6.
And now coming in at number 6 is Rings. It wasn't that scary. It was one of the least scary horror movies I've seen in quite some time, and it had a final 2 minutes that just made me really angry. I felt that was really uncalled for. It seemed like a stupid attempt to set up a sequel that's probably not coming. I got that it was attempting to be more of a mystery, and I appreciated that. I was never really on the edge of my seat. I never really got the shock of a good jump scare, and I found it just kind of dull and just there because its original source material was so much fun.
Number 5.
And taking the number 5 spot, we have an animated movie that will beat out the Emoji Movie for my least favorite of the year. And I'm sorry to say it, but it's Despicable Me 3. This movie was way too all over the place. Let me count the storylines it had. Gru and Lucy trying to get their jobs back, Lucy trying to be a mom, Margot with that weird French boy, Agnes trying to locate a unicorn, Balthazar Brat trying to reclaim his big fortune and popularity. Oh, and there's also the Minions. And this movie is only 80 minutes, so if you do the math, there's only 12 or so minutes for each of these people to really lay out their story, and as a result, none of them seem complete. It feels like at this point, Despicable Me would be better off as a TV show. I guess I dislike all of the Despicable Me movies, except for the Minions spin-off, and I'm starting to grow more on the first movie. I'm liking that more and more as time goes on. One example of how this is way too rushed is Gru and Drew end up arguing about the best way to handle this jewel, And I found that it could be some very good development for how much Gru has changed and how Drew wants to keep up the family business. I could see both sides of this argument very clearly. And yet Gru and Drew make up way too fast. Like, before I knew it, it was the end credits. And a lot of Despicable Me fans were waiting a long time for this movie. They waited 4 years after the second film, and it was really a disappointment, if you ask me.
Number 4.
And taking the number 4 spot, we have a movie that I gave a D to, and yet there's a C- movie next, a D+ movie after that, and finally the D that I was going to give a D-. Like, that's a lot of Ds. But my point is, like, it's a D movie that I still sort of recommend. I feel like if you want something that's going to shock you and anger you and depress you and disturb you, then I guess I will have to go with Mother. I was so frightened to see this movie. I knew that I was in for something that was going to twist up my mind because I heard how controversial it was. It got such great reviews from critics, but an F on Cinema Score. Like, that's the sort of stuff that immediately leads me to see the movie. And well, it was such a mixed bag for me at first. Whatever way you slice it, I could see that it was both amazing and horrible. This movie, it really depends on what mood you're in at first. But then, I mean, its final resolution was just despicable. If I had watched this in the theater, I would have left and I would have maybe thrown my popcorn at the screen or my drink to see if it could smash. Like, I get that Darren Aronofsky wanted to do something that would mess with our brains. He kind of knew that this movie would be controversial. And so it sort of seems silly for me to be hating on this movie so much. I feel like he's watching the screen right now and just saying, oh well, like, you're just another one of those critics who has both missed the point and not missed the point. But, well, there are some things that I'm afraid are just unforgivable and just torturous. But if you wanted to talk to me about Mother, I'd be more than willing to. So it's on number 4 on this list, and it's this low because of its final 2 minutes, but it's not lower on this list because it's still very thought-provoking.
Number 3.
And taking the number 2 spot is another movie that everyone's gonna hate me for being on this list, but it's John Wick Chapter 2. It feels like a vanilla sundae. There's nothing special about John Wick at all. I haven't seen the first movie, so I don't know what to say. John Wick Chapter 2 was just a plain shoot 'em up, which, like Dunkirk, had no characters I cared about, including Keanu Reeves. And here's where John Wick Chapter 2, in my opinion, gets just off the charts stupid. Even stupid for a movie that has 20 guns, say, pointed at his head. John Wick meets up with this strange woman out in this cave at this big night festival, and they talk for a little bit, and then this woman just slits her entire arm, and she just bleeds to death in her hot tub. And I thought, this actress, she showed no fear of actually dying. She must be like 30 years old, and you've just decided, I'm gonna die right here, right now, just from seeing John Wick? Like, you could have fooled me. And maybe she had been thinking about death for a long time, but there was no real explanation for her behavior. I kind of like this fist fight John Wick has with this individual that they afterwards share a drink over, but its punches didn't give the same impact that it thought it was giving, and the story made no sense, and I wish that the dog could have been in there more instead of just taken in for the entire movie. Yeah, I didn't care for the film.
Number 2.
And now, coming in at number 2, you see, back in 2016, I saw a movie called Passengers, and I saw it because I thought, okay, I have to watch this before I make my best list. And it ended up being on my worst list. For this movie, it's the same thing. I saw it at the very last minute, and it's at my number 2 spot. Number 2 is American Assassin. I'm still a Dylan O'Brien fan. He was in the first 2 Maze Runner movies, and they're some of the best movies ever made. But you see, On my best list, I decided to give The Hitman's Bodyguard a spot on number 10, even though there were movies I had seen where I'd given higher ratings to, just because of how much fun it was in its unoriginality. But American Assassin really had nothing going for it. It was just a vengeance story. It was like a chocolate without a center. It was just training and over-the-top killing. It was like Kick-Ass without all the costumes. I'm even struggling to come up with words to say it because I just forgot everything like the next day. But trust me, number 1 is a lot more memorable than American Assassin, and yeah, I bet you know which one I'm talking about by now.
Number 1.
I was originally not gonna watch this movie because I thought, there's no way I'm not gonna hate it. I try as a critic to be sensible. I try to go into every movie with a C+ in mind, which is a 5 out of 10, and then just let whatever I see in front of me carry it around. But no movie this year had dragged my personal rating down so instantaneously as this movie. Coming in at number 1 is the sequel to 50 Shades of Grey, 50 Shades Darker. It's kind of incredible. 50 Shades of Black was my number 1 worst of the year last year, and this year it's the sequel to the movie it was satirizing. I watched this movie because there were so many other better movies, and I felt like I was just too curious. Anastasia and Christian, they resolved their issues within the first 10 minutes. I thought, oh come on, like that. There was actually quite an okay climax in 50 Shades of Grey, which caused some real tension. I felt like they could have waited like 30 or 40 minutes or the whole movie to think about themselves so that we actually really feel the impact of the trauma they're going through not being together. And whenever it goes back to its story about Christian's troubles and his other girlfriends, it just cuts again to some sex scenes, and they don't really have any gravity whatsoever, and there are so much that it felt distracting, and we don't ship this couple from the start anyway, so as a result these scenes feel lifeless. And you know, Dakota Johnson is a beautiful girl, and she really deserves so much more. Her character even is a fiction editor, which is a dream job of mine, and when she has to replace her boss for a conference, she really nails it. And yet, I thought, well, if these guys knew her sex life, they wouldn't take her as seriously as before. According to Anna, she loves working, and she loves reading, and she does so much stuff for the company right, and I wish that we could have seen that instead. Like, anything but what we saw on the screen. E.L. James's husband, Niall Leonard, had wrote this movie, and he's the author of one of my favorite trilogies of all time, Crusher. Like, I thought, how could he have come up with something like this? I admit, I guess the reason that it's not an F is because it looks good. And it has, like the last one, a storytelling sort of soundtrack with 1 or 2 amusing tunes. But that's all it has going for it. I can't believe I sat through another 50 Shades movie, and well, if 50 Shades Freed actually ends up good, it's not gonna end up good. I can tell I'm just gonna hate it the way it's been going. So there you have it. Those are my 10 worst movies of 2017. So, as I said, it was actually a very good year, and even most of these movies had some admirable stuff to them, so I'll see you next year, and I'm really looking forward to doing another top 10 for books and movies with you. And I hope you had a great year, and I'd love to know what some of your top 10 worst and best were. So, see ya! Now I have to go pack up. My family and I are going to see The Killers, and I'm supposed to be packing my bag up so that we can do so, but I've instead been filming this video. So, ta-ta! Or, wait, ta-ta? Well, what a cheesy British way of saying bye.